Now, as the lack of the new NAIRA notes continue to hit hard on Katsina residents, the Central Bank of Nigeria is paying unscheduled visits to commercial banks in the state. Now, the monitoring is aimed at ensuring that all commercial banks comply with the Apex Bank's directives on the redesigned NAIRA notes and its distribution. Abdullahi Yamadi reports that the monitoring team was led by an assistant director of the CBN, Amina Adamu. His report.
The monitoring and enforcement team seeks to find out how much of the new notes was issued to the commercial banks and how it was dispensed to customers. The team also took time to finding out how much was loaded in various automated teller machines, ATMs.
We embark on spot checks and cash swaps. In Katsina State, we have 34 local government areas, but only 8 local government areas are covered by the DMBs. So there's need for us to ensure we reach out to the citizens of the state by carrying out this cash swap.
The Apex Bank is concerned about the alleged diversion of the new notes and the plight of petty traders, especially in rural communities across Katsina State. The team leader, Amina Adamu, said the Apex Bank will not accept anything from commercial banks short of total compliance to CBN directives, considering the hardship being experienced by Nigerians.
We also embark on monitoring of the DMBs to ensure that their ATMs are functional and functioning at all times. Well, so far so good. We have covered some banks, DMBs within the Katsina metropolis, and some ATMs that were not functioning were loaded at our instance, and we ensured full compliance. So we have not encountered any breach so far.
Officials of EFCC, ICPC formed part of the CBN monitoring team on a visit to Katsina State amidst heightened new NAIRA note shortage across the country. While economists admitted that the NAIRA redesign policy is good for the economy, they, however, observed loopholes and gaps which have negatively affected the daily lives of millions across the country. Abdullahi Ismayamadi, Trust Television News, Katsina.
Okay, all right, so still on this particular topic of discussion, we're now being joined by Dr. Tefa Abraham, an economist, as well as Emmanuel Osemeka, public affairs analyst, to discuss the new NAIRA notes, its scarcity and implications for small businesses. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on Daybreak.
Good morning. Thank you. Good morning, sir. Everything that is happening seems to be on your forte, Doctor. It's about the economy and the interface between policy and its eventual impact on the life and livelihood of Nigerians. The last time you were here, you took us through a journey of the various interplay of the economic actors in the economy, the fiscal, the monetary, the trade, policy, and all of that. And you try to make us understand how the actions of one has some kind of impact on the others, or how the actions of each of these units sort of impact life and livelihood. We have seen this NAIRA redesigned. It's been on for over 100 days. But what has happened in the last couple of weeks it's one that nobody saw coming. We have seen the gradual erosion of confidence in public policy. We have seen people endure untold hardship. People sleep at ATMs. People finding it practically impossible, even where they sought to use alternative channels. The alternative channels are practically not available. you are not able to make transfers. Where you succeed in making the transfer, they are not consummated until the next day. Some kind of surge has sort of brought the entire system to its knees. Where do you think this gap exists? Is it in the failure of policy, or that the time was rather too short for implementations, or that as Nigerians we are just not prepared for a shift from the norm? Where do you situate this crisis as it is right now?
Okay, thank you very much. The idea of this policy is brilliant. The idea of changing the naira, the currency from time to time, is a standard economic practice that every country adopts once in a while. You want to change your currency because as a country, the naira in our own case is part of our identity. That's why it's defended with so much power. It's not something we should deface or trample upon. The naira, the value of the naira communicates the value of Nigerians. The value of the dollar represents the value of every American. The value of the British pound represents the value of every British citizen. So that's how this thing is. So from time to time, just like you wake up, want to take your bath, have a fresh look. From time to time, countries change their currency. But the change of this currency happens smoothly. It's not a kink action. It's not something that is stepwise or disconnected. It is smooth. The transition should be smooth, such that while you are absorbing the old ones, you allow the new ones to replace it's like elimination and substitution. You're eliminating the old ones, substituting it for the new ones. Gradually, over time, you just allow it run through, so that by the time Nigerians wake up 6 months, 8 months later, they just realize that they are holding new notes. But what makes the policy look a bit distorting to the economic balance is the seemingly rush that seems to accompany the introduction of the policy. And again, when it was announced that there will be currency change, a lot of anticipation followed that expectation. And economic policy follows rational expectation. And the monetary policy arm of economic policy is headed by the central bank. The central bank is not just a bank that has a governor. It represents the monetary policy of that country. So when we choose central bank governors, if you look at the history of all central bank governors, they are always economists with a particular view, with a particular leaning, thank you, whether they are for price stability or for output growth. So when you choose a central bank governor, you read the person's publications. It's an academic choice who should be CBN governor. The whole idea of monetary policy is controlled by the quantity theory of money that was first formulated since 1517 by a Polish mathematician. Then Milton Friedman popularized it in 1960 when he wrote about about money supply and the American economy. So, and that quantity theory of money states that the value of goods and services is directly proportional to the stock of money supply in that economy. So monetary policy is monetary economics, deeply rooted in classic traditional economic thinking. So it's not something that should be political at all. Central bank governors are always very sharp academicians who believe that, who are familiar with the role of monetary policy, working together with fiscal and trade, like you gave in your introduction, to achieve macroeconomic goals of economic growth, job creation, balance of payment stability, and price stability. So by the time you have the Apex Bank meddling in politics and allowing its policies to look like political action, it's a very bad trend for Nigeria. The central bank is full of a lot of professional economists. All of us are economists. I studied ABU, first degree economists, second degree economists, PhD economists as well, but not in ABU, but first 2 degrees economics. So we all know ourselves. These are brilliant guys loaded in the central bank. The central bank itself is like 100 universities put together. So where I'm going with that argument is that its policy actions, whether the people in the development finance team, whether those in research, those in monetary policy, those in international trade, those even in the admin, from the security to the governor, they all should be professionals. Professionals that study the economy and take policies independently. That's why the CBN Act, modeled after the act of many other countries, allows the CBN operational autonomy and policy autonomy so that whatever they are doing is towards the good of, in fact, the greater good of the economy. So the policy itself is nice, but the biggest point I want to make in my introduction is that the very moment the central bank governor started having, I'm not too political, started having body language of to buy or not to buy a party form, to be or not to be politician. All these things affect, and like every economic theory from Samuel Paulson, every economic textbook will tell you that consumer behavior, investor behavior is built on confidence. How effective a policy should be is anchored on confidence. Don't allow consumer confidence on any policy to be shaken. So right now, what we are having, what you are seeing in the people rushing the POS, rushing ATM, is panic withdrawal. It's response to a policy that they have fear. And matured economic policy is to transit from one point to the next without allowing that threat or panic to accompany it.
Interesting. I will come to you.
Yeah.
As we progress in this conversation. Coming to my brother Emmanuel Usemeka, you have listened to the introductions by Doctor, and he said quite a number of things, some of them in the realms of intellectuals. I want you to step that conversation down as much as possible. Since the introduction of he said a lot of things that would have given birth to some of the rush that we have seen, whether perceived or real, whether these people actually need the money or they just want to feel comfortable that they have some in their possession so that they can go to sleep and sleep very well without having nightmares. But we have seen in very practical terms that there were very little buy-in. So even where the confidence exists, there needed to be buy-in, there needed to be consultations. A lot of people needed to understand the greater good that he talked about. And everything that accompanied this policy. From the little times the CBN has spoken, or even the president or proponents of this policy, there seemed to be so much benefits for the country, but there were no buy-ins. Did you think that the absence of that buy-in, whether by Nigerians or through public awareness and all of that, may have impacted critically on how this policy has been received?
Thank you very much for having me. I've heard a lot from the economists. You know, when economics speak, you listen carefully because there are a lot of things you learn from them. But for me, I believe 100% that the policy of is it the colored NAIRA or new design NAIRA, whatever you want to call it, it's not bad. It's not a bad idea. It's a wonderful policy by the government. But in reality, you can't divorce the introduction, the timing, you can't divorce it from the president. If you have followed President Muhammadu Buhari from his days as Federal Commissioner of Petroleum to becoming the head of state, if you follow through his policies, you see that everything, if not everything, at least 80% of what President Muhammadu Buhari pursued as policy thrust in his 8 years, it's not different from what he did earlier in his first foray into the leadership of Nigeria. He changed NAIRA before. The question is, how long what was the duration, the time frame with which NAIRA was changed in 1984? When you get the answer to that, you will understand this one. However, the difference here with this one is with the fact that from intelligence reports, which the president and of course the CBN have also pushed forward, is that you have so much cash outside, and those cash outside is in the hands of non-state actors. So you have a lot of kidnapping for ransom, you have a whole lot of things going on. And of course that's failure of the CBN because they have their open market operation, OMO, that they use to pull back funds and all that. But unfortunately, this new design introduction and going 100% cashless, because this is 100% cashless, what it is you can't take it away from the elections, one, and of course the issue of what do you guys call the low total cash outside of the bank.
books.
So if you're supposed to have 3 point whatever trillion, in circulation, and out of that you have 2.4 in the hands of people. I mean, we've seen wads of cash. In fact, I saw in one bank, somebody brought in sacks of 1,000 naira note bundles with Oceanic Bank straps. Do you remember how long ago Oceanic Bank
went out of circulation?
That's more than 11 years ago. So you can imagine how long that money
has been in private
hands. You've seen loads of cash that is destroyed, or I mean, you can't even
probably
use
preserved.
them. So when you look at all of this, you will appreciate the policy. However, one of the failures of the CBN, if I'll put it at the doorstep of CBN, because the CBN is supposed to supervise the deposit money banks, is that when Charles Chukwuma Soludo and of course Sanusi were governors, they were the ones who came up with the first introductions of the cashless policy, and they faced it. So that way it was easy for people to have time to begin to imbibe the culture of cashless system. And also you also must understand the fact that our network coverage that is supposed to drive the cashless system, we are still not 100% there. There are farmers in several communities who still deal with cash, and you can't divorce that from the farmers. So that is what is wrong with this particular policy. Then on the other hand, the deposit money banks did not improve their infrastructure in preparation for this policy. The truth is, this policy is fantastic, it's good, but the only challenge I think why a lot of the politicians kicked against it is because, one, it's within and around the election period. Don't forget, vote buying is mostly done using cash. And that's why you see the hue and cry from the politicians from all walks of life. If it was done at another time, most likely you would not hear this level of
okay.
noise.
All right, let's come back to you, Doctor. Now, let's talk about the implication of the redesign on small businesses. Now, you'd agree with me that small businesses are actually supposed to, they're supposed to benefit. They're supposed to benefit from, the cashless policy, when it comes to transfer and all that. But we're seeing now that even the apps are not working. POS operators are actually selling these monies. And how did we get it wrong, or where did we get it wrong? And a lot of small businesses, if you read or watch some of the reports, are shutting down because they don't have access to cash to even buy food stuff. There was a report on a particular lady who shut down her business. She's a restaurant owner because she didn't have access to cash. She couldn't go buy raw materials for her restaurant, so she had to shut down her business.
Okay, in terms of the implications for small businesses, the Nigerian economy, everything's about understanding the structure of the Nigerian economy. The Nigerian economy is still largely informal and largely financially excluded. CBN, in partnership with a number of development partners, normally come up with this periodic publication on financial inclusion. I think they partner with one organization called EFINA to publish financial inclusion and exclusion index. It shows clearly that there's still huge concern of financial exclusion in the rural area. And financial exclusion simply means the people with bank accounts is still, without bank accounts, is still large in the rural areas. The people adoption of mobile money or use of phones for money transfers is still very low. Now, the idea there is that if the economy is informal and then also financially excluded, and everything is concentrated in the rural area, then you can see that businesses that operate in the rural areas are really struggling to catch up with using banking services. That does not mean that they don't use, they do, but the process is slow. So maybe every week somebody goes, maybe let me use Taraba State for example. Somebody, maybe Donga, in a community inside Donga, will take time to travel out to the main, to Takum, for instance, to deposit money in UB or one of those banks, and then come back and then take the money back. So it's a slow process where everybody collects and sends someone. Then in households, you have somebody, just one person, maybe with a phone. So that person receives the alert on behalf of his mom or his cousins or his relative, then goes to the town to withdraw through POS. If the money is too big, goes to the bank and then comes back. So it's slow. So, and if you look at the way our National Social Investment Programs was designed, Empower, GIP, conditional cash transfer, especially what gave it a big boost was during COVID. You can see how much the Federal Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Social Development, and the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, anyway, you can see how much they dispensed for conditional cash transfer, Empower, farmer money, trader money, market money during the COVID period. And it was done largely by giving people in the rural areas this cash. So all of a sudden, the effect in terms of how this policy is affecting these people is that all the money they keep, these people they are the typical aspect of our people who keep money outside the banking system. And for central bank, every central bank policy works through commercial banks. In fact, our point of contact with central bank should be commercial banks. It is very strange to see central bank spearheading these visits right now. Commercial bank should be the one driving it. In fact, seeing central bank officials driving this policy, it's like seeing Nigerian army doing policing. Central bank works through deposit money banks, commercial banks. So that's how
Commercial banks in agreement with the CBN.
that is to show that that's where the engagement needs to take place. Central bank central bank can change bank MD. Once they see that the action of that bank MD will distort the equilibrium of the Nigerian economy, central bank is that autonomous and that powerful. So the answer is still with central bank. Use more of engagement so that you will reduce the impact on people. You know, you ask a critical question, implication on people. So there's implication on households, implication on small businesses. Answer, find a better way. Aside this super agent and POS agent, because they are overwhelmed, find a way to partner with maybe humanitarian affairs, especially the National Social Investment Program aspect. Partner with other CSOs so that they can help you find, just like the way we helped businesses during COVID. When businesses were impacted during COVID, the government helped those businesses to have some access to some funds that will help them ameliorate the effects. When households were being affected as well, the government helped them. They should use those same channels. The central bank has all these answers. It's with the central bank. They should use those channels to help minimize the effect on people. Otherwise, what will happen now is that people will be receiving this new cash and refuse to use it to buy. And no consumption, no production. No production, no investment. No investment, no employment. No employment, you have the whole cycle just reversing down. So the impact on economic system is what we really need to address by looking at the implication and helping households and small businesses ameliorate the effect that this policy has on them. And it's simple. Help those who want the cash to get this cash. If it means opening help desks of CBN everywhere, every state has central bank office. And it's always well protected. It's either very close to DSS office or close to EFCC. It's right in the city. Partner with local champions, with traditional leaders, with heads of faith-based organizations, so that people can just simply change their old money to the new one and let business of buying and selling continue. It's an economic threat for consumption to be shut down. That is something that we shouldn't allow. For people to hold the new money and refuse to use it to buy, it's another form of economic hijack. So enhancing, greasing the economy by ensuring that money flows. That's why it's called currency. It's like water, it's like blood, the circular flow of income. It should flow around so that businesses can continue. In other words, the person wanting money for wedding should not be struggling. The person wanting money for business and purchase, for bread, anything, should not struggle. We should ensure access to this new currency.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
Yes.
Coming back to you, Mr. Emmanuel, I listened to quite a number of the things you said in your submissions, and as well as doctors. And the question for me would be, which should preface the other? Is it policy? And then people aligning, or you want something to become a convention, then you design a policy around it? And I say this because in your remarks, you talked about facing policies, how his predecessors have done. But we've been on this journey for 12 years. So at what point were we going to upscale, to then bring every other people? And I say this in response to what Doctor has said, because when you get a large number of your population in the informal sector, it means the transmission of monetary policy even becomes difficult. It would only impact those who are included. You talked about using the open market operation. It will only mop up cash that are genuine. All the other cash that are in the private votes that are meant to achieve different purposes would never respond to an OMO, an OMO cell or what have you. So at what point, because are we trying to say that even the policy to cause this distortion as a way of recalibrating the system was not deliberate?
So I will agree 100% that this particular policy was very deliberate, and that's what I was trying to explain in the beginning, that you cannot divorce this from politics, because, and also you can also not divorce it from our reality. So like clearly what you mentioned, OMO would just mop up what you call legal funds that are probably, lying here and there. But OMO will not mop up funds in the hands of bandits in the bush. OMO will not mop up funds in the containers or wells or wherever of politicians. So you have so much of those guys, and this was driven by intelligence report, and clearly OMO will not also mop up, funds from corrupt means and what have you, and that's why I went back memory lane to remind us of what President Muhammadu Buhari did in the past. When he changed money in 1984, it was primarily because of corruption. He wanted to tame corruption at that time. Was it a good policy? As experts will tell us whether it was or it wasn't. I mean, we know how people suffered at the time. Similar to what we have today, if you look critically at this policy, fantastic policy, but where I fault this policy is to the extent that, just like Doc had mentioned, we have a largely informal economy, from the rural communities. Like I've always, postulated that Nigeria is largely a rural country. Not just an economy. I see Nigeria as a very rural country, because if you take a look at, if you go to certain states, besides the state capital, the rest of the local governments are in rural communities.
Absolutely.
And in some states, you probably have, like we saw from the report, where the lady was talking about 34 local governments, and she says there are 8 local governments. So out of 34 local governments, you probably have 8 local governments that have banks. What happens to the remaining local government? How did CBN sit down to take a look at data to drive the implementation of this in such localities? That's why you have this whole, charade, this whole, issues around people rushing and fighting for money. And don't forget, when Sanusi did the cashless system, where I think they did 12 states or thereabout, and they were specific to those states that had a lot of issues. They were very specific, and it was driven by data. Unlike this one, I do not see any data that the current CBN governor is relying on, or him and his team is relying on, to be able to drive this particular.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. Thank you very much, Dr.